Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, once again, Congress has offered members the classic Sophie's choice. Either vote no on the transportation bill and guarantee no reforms to road and bridge building happen, or vote yes and get reforms necessary to save money and streamline construction, but do it without actually paying for it and racking up the national debt. While many of my colleagues are sure to rush to the floor in the next few hours to pat themselves on the back for accomplishing this marvelous transformational highway bill, we should not be popping champagne. There's no backslapping deserved. Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that in many ways the policy related to surface transportation takes a significant step forward. I'm deeply discouraged by the phony pay-fors. Mr. Speaker, during the upcoming debate on this legislation, you and the American people are going to hear repeatedly that this bill is fully offset and fully paid for. Essentially, that new revenue and savings will keep the cost of this bill from adding to our national debt. Plain and simply not the case. Most of the offsets are from general fund transfers. Now, it would take a magician of miraculous skill to transfer money out of a fund that has a negative balance of $400 billion. In fact, if there's money to transfer from an empty fund, I might suggest that we instead try to make the fund a bit less empty instead of transferring it to more spending. But I digress. Let's take a look at the pay-fors. One of a long series of phony offsets is selling off oil that is currently owned by the American people in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. While you're stewarding the American people's money, you're supposed to buy low and sell high, not the other way around. Not only are we selling off a public asset at near record low prices, we're also counting on getting over double the current market price in order to make it work. If you can find a buyer to pay $94 a barrel for oil like the authors claim, while the market price is $41, I've got a bridge to nowhere to sell you. Another phony offset is hiring aggressive private contractors to go after people who are delinquent on their federal taxes. Now listen, I'm all for collecting all outstanding taxes. But what does that have to do with road building? If, in fact, we can collect an additional $2.5 billion by doing this, shouldn't that money be put against the $400 billion deficit we're facing already? And why is it an offset that generates its revenue amount over 10 years when the highway bill is only for 5 years? What's going to happen in year 6? Will all the road building in the country that it needs, will it be completed by then? Are there not any other roads going to need to be built in year 6? Are we not then just going to have to borrow even more money? The bill does make a very reasonable point that taxes must be indexed to inflation to keep from losing value every year. I found this quite ironic. Now, that makes total sense. So it's applied to the gas tax, right? Wrong. Mr. Speaker, here's my favorite phony pay-for. The bill's authors didn't have the political courage to deal with user fees for drivers, but instead are indexing taxes elected by the U.S. Customs Service. Now, that's really ironic, but that tax is easy to hide from constituents. Now Americans returning from overseas with purchases will pay more for them in taxes to pave roads, while people who use the roads simply look on and smile. And yet there's more. There are modifications to royalty payments. Wow, that's got everything to do with roads. Or how about denying passports for those who have unpaid taxes? This is allegedly going to raise $350 million. Of course, that has nothing to do with roads, and in fact, may not even be possible without all kinds of court trials and cases. Mr. Speaker, I know you can sense my frustration. At the end of the day, pass and the President will sign it, and while everyone is patting themselves on the back for passing a long-term solution, we are going to continue to pile debt on our grandchildren. We are so close, though, to getting this right. We streamlined the process to get roads built faster, saving taxpayer dollars. We've returned more decision-making back to the states, and we've reduced the bureaucracy and red tape around transportation construction. The gentleman from Colorado and the gentleman from Georgia have eloquently explained some of the benefits of this piece of legislation, and these are valuable and not insignificant reforms. And it's because of these reforms that I'm going to reluctantly support this bill in spite of these phony god-awful pay-fors, and here's why. I realize that if this bill does not pass, what we will get instead is another extension of current policy and more borrowing, because that's what the Congress has done since I've been here. So this goes back to the classic Sophie's choice I mentioned at the beginning of my conversation here. To get the good, I must accept the bad. To reject the bad, I must reject the good. If only this body, this Congress, had the political courage to tell the American people a simple truth. If something is worth buying, it's worth paying for. Taxing tomorrow should not replace living within our means today. It hurts future generations, and I am profoundly disappointed. We can and should do better for the people who sent us here to speak for them. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlemen.